How many of you would like to avoid mistakes in your land business? Sure, it would be nice if everything was smooth running, but that's not how the real world works. There's a saying that success comes from experience, and experience comes from learning, and learning comes from mistakes. Today on the Land.MBA podcast, Dave and I are talking to Todd Hays, who is currently working on a multiple seven-figure deal. Learn how one of the most successful guys in the land business has leveraged his mistakes to land the biggest deal of his career.
Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the podcast. We got Todd Hays from Land Buyer USA, and of course, my counterpart, Mr. Howard Zonder. How are you today, gentlemen?
Hey, good. Thanks, David, for having me on.
I'm doing spectacular. I am really, really psyched to have Mr. Todd Hays, the legend, on our podcast today, who's got a personality and a story as big as the state of Texas where he resides. And gosh, we've had so many laughs and so many, just heard so many amazing stories over the last couple of years. And it's just going to be great to share some of this with the audience. So thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Howard.
Yeah. Dave, you want to kick us off?
Awesome.
This has been such a great podcast. I listened to quite a few of them that are out there in the land arena, and by far yours is head and shoulders the best in terms of equipping and helping the seasoned land enthusiast or entrepreneur. So thank you for what you guys do.
Wow.
Well, that means a lot coming from
thank
you.
you, Todd. We appreciate that. Yeah, much appreciated. I'm overwhelmed. That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, gosh, we got a ton to talk about. I mean, you have been up to a lot, man. I recently saw you down in Houston at Zing's house. That was a lot of fun connecting with you and Mitch and Andrew and of course Mr. Zing himself. So that was fun, and I got to get a little glimpse of some of the things that you had going on, and so we'd like to talk about some of that today. Why don't we start with where you're at today and this really cool commercial project you're working on, and then we'll kind of work backwards on how you got into land business. We'll talk a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and mistakes you've made along the way, and how your business has grown, and how you got to where you are today. So first give the audience a little bit of give them a little bio, a little background, and then let's jump into this big commercial deal you're doing.
Right. So I've been in real estate for 20 years. And so mainly as a part-time buy and hold investor. My family and I were missionaries overseas for a long time, and we had our first child, and I thought, oh my goodness, we're making 12 grand a year. What are we going to do? I don't want to bring a kid up in poverty like I was. And so I looked at real estate, and I started stacking up rental properties, and we did our first deal, and we fixed it up and we leased it out. We gave ourselves a 25% bump in pay by doing positive cash flow. I looked at my wife, I said, we got to do this again. And we kept going. And so we did a bunch of those and built up our portfolio, single family houses. We actually bought an apartment complex, a small one, with my cousin. And, when we got back to the States, I started flipping houses also, just to kind of generate some income. I'd have a job in sales, and I would be flipping houses on the side. It was a lot of work, a lot of risk, a lot of sweat equity. And I figured out that I only made money when I got to the closing table. So my big question was, how do I get to the closing table faster? And therein lies the land. And so that's when I started to zero in on land. So this is my 5th year full-time in the land arena. And the picture behind me is actually our latest acquisition. We took down 72 acres about an hour from me, and we're going to cut it up and sell them off in 10-acre tracts. This is the big pond on one of them. So it's been an amazing ride, what land has allowed us to do as a family. And I'm very grateful overall. And I am proof that you can make a lot of mistakes in this business and still be successful, because I'm going to talk about a lot of mistakes, which we've made many. So that's kind of my background on how I got into land.
So we're gonna give them the big wow up front, and then we're gonna figure out how we get from where you just said all the way up to this big wow. But let's give them the wow, and then we'll work backwards.
Okay. Well, I don't want to count my chickens before they're hatched, but we are into the biggest deal that we've ever done, and we're very grateful for that. We decided that the commercial land environment is a place that we wanted to operate, because there's just a lot of things, the way we go about marketing. I'm sure most of your viewers are in this direct marketing. We took down 18 acres in the city, and we did a lot of due diligence on this property because it's been vacant. It's got a forest on it. Back in the 70s, there were 3 active gas wells, which is very typical here in Texas. So we were concerned that it never got developed. Like, why did it not get developed? The answers we were getting from the seller, it was his wife's, she's deceased, and she got it from her dad, who worked for the oil company. And, but we're thinking, maybe EPA issues. Could be trouble. So we spent a lot of time doing a phase 1 environmental. And so we thought, you know what, this is going to cost about $2,000. Let's do it. It's important. They came back with the results. Yeah, you might have an issue. Oh, okay. What's next? Phase 2 environmental. And that's like $10,000. And so I'm like, well, you know what? We got to do it. And so we did that, and it came back, and it came back clean. And so I was like, okay, now I'm really ready to, commit capital. One of the lessons I learned in another failed deal I'm going to tell you about is that you got to do a survey. When you're going to commit multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to a property, you're going to do some due diligence. You're going to spend some money in that phase. And so we were in it for almost, I want to say close to $20,000. Because we had to clear a path to get to this driller had to get in with his big tractor, and we had to get some crew. And we did a little DIY and rented some power tools and tore into the forest and made this thing happen. And long story short, my partner, who happens to be my sister-in-law, was on the other side, confirming some other aspects, utilities, main one. Because we're inside the city limits. She was on the phone with the city official, somebody at Public Works, for over an hour. And he told her, yeah, you do have water and sewer. You're in the city limits. Everything looks good. And I'm like, yeah, great. So I go back to my checklist for due diligence. And one of the things I do is I zoom in on Google Maps, and I saw across the street, there's, City of Houston sewer caps. There's sewer there. Right there next to it, there's a fire hydrant. There must be water there. Okay, so you make assumptions. These are not good assumptions, mind you. And so we close this deal using investors' capital, and we're in it for $600K, more or less. Okay. And there's all kinds of challenges, but we get into it, and my commercial broker, who we found, is somebody that's been very helpful, and he gets this thing going. And he, first question, you got water and sewer? And I'm like, yeah, that's not an issue. We already took care of that. Well, we start digging. Turns out the city official was wrong. We do not have water and sewer. And so now we're scrambling after we spent this money to figure out a way to get the water and sewer there. And so I had meetings with the Public Works director. I've been out there. I mean, there's a number of neighbors. that I've contacted, found their numbers, gone and seen them, tried to figure a way, a win-win solution so that we could at least get the sewer line. The sewer line is more important in my mind than the water, because water, we could just get a well. So we got so much space, it's not a big issue. But they told me, you know, septic is not a possibility because there's a city ordinance. You can't have septic here. I'm like, are you, excuse me? You're not giving us access. Why didn't the city create this line here? This is a major road. It's not like this is like landlocked property. This is on a major road, but there's no pipes. And so it turned into a kind of a nightmare. And, you know, long story short, I'm dealing with my commercial broker, telling them the series of things that have happened. And it was about 2 months of struggling with this. And he goes, look, Todd, you're just a paper developer. You're not a real developer. You're not going to spend, you know, $250,000 to bring the water line in over a mile. You know, you're just not going to do that. I'm like, you're right. I'm not. And he goes, but you've got a lot of data here. I think we can list it now. And I'm like, great, list it. So he puts it on the market. And the next day, I'm not kidding when I say the next day, we had a buyer. And this buyer came in with a multiple 7-figure letter of intent.
Is it just me, or is it getting harder and harder to count on a job for our financial security? Who would have ever believed that we would go from the lowest unemployment in 50 years to 40 million people unemployed? Whether you have a great job and want to create a second income, or you're recently unemployed, you need to check out Land.MBA, your one-stop shop for land investors. Investing in vacant land is a proven business model that can help you build a reliable and scalable second income. Imagine a business where you love what you do. There's no limit on how much money you can make. You can operate your business from anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And best of all, you can never be fired or downsized. If this sounds good to you, Land.MBA provides everything you need to get your business up and running and delivering income quickly. You get education, an end-to-end video course, and optional coaching to help you get started faster and turn your energy into income. You get tools so you can automate and outsource the busy work and stay super organized. You get access to a thriving community of like-minded investors, which is a powerful way to share best practices and develop potential partnerships for growing your business. And finally, you get access to deal financing, so you never have to pass on a great investment opportunity due to limited funds. Our team has over a decade of real estate investing experience and has the knowledge and experience you need to help navigate any investing scenario. And with Land.MBA, we hold nothing back. Because there are no upsells, you get access to all of our combined knowledge right out of the gate. So don't wait to provide your family with financial freedom. Sign up today for Land.MBA's Soup to Nuts Land Investing video course. Just go to courses.land.mba and use coupon code FREEDOM to get 25% off. That's courses.land.mba and coupon code FREEDOM. And let us help you say goodbye to your job and hello to financial freedom.
First thing I said is, hey, what in the world is going on with this? Does he know that there's no water and there's no sewer?
Or does he know something you don't know?
Right, exactly. He might know there's gold under there. I don't know what he knows. Honestly, I don't care. If we exit at this number, it's going to be good. But, you know, I'll circle back around to the end. And it's one of the things that I feel like I want to share with the viewing audience that I feel like is an unfair advantage that we have that probably most of the folks that watch this aren't going to know about. But the truth is this will be a huge paradigm shift for us and the business, because it's going to vault things forward tremendously.
That is amazing. One day listed in a multiple 7-figure offer. And now it's 18 acres of forested land in the city. Now but it's zoned commercial.
Yeah, it is. So here's the thing. You're going to make money when you're buying it by the acre, but you're selling it by the foot. I mean, it's like donuts, you know, If you buy them by the dozen, they're cheaper.
Yeah.
Or pizza.
Yeah.
You buy it by the slice,
Yeah.
it's expensive. So
Yeah.
that's the niche of this commercial thing.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So you just, so if I get this right, you paper developed it, you at least got it paper subdivided.
Well, no, we're not going to subdivide it. It's composed of a number of tracks, but we're selling it as one big block. So this is
So
not a,
you didn't have to do, you ended up not actually having to do anything. You just had to do the environmental testing.
survey, the environmental tests, and then we had to figure out the easement issue. That was, and it's still not figured
Right.
out. We've got
it's on the road though. It's road frontage.
It is, but I'm talking about the sewer line and water line easements.
Right.
So the city didn't like
right, but
curve those along the street like you normally would. Didn't do it.
But
Wow.
the guy who's going to build vertical, who's got the jack to pay multiple seven figures for the raw land in and of itself, that little $250,000 problem to run the water and sewer ain't a problem for him.
Right. Yeah. Definitely not.
Because he's got a much bigger plan involved, and it's peanuts compared to what we do. But you're sitting there going, if those are peanuts, I'll take them.
Right. Hey, I'll leave the shells on the ground. Don't worry. There's more.
Yeah. I'm not greedy, man.
Now, when your broker listed the property, did she list it with that multiple seven-figure number, or did it just say make an offer?
No. There was definitely a number attached to it. And so just for clarity's sake, in the commercial world, you don't get an offer immediately. You get a letter of intent. Okay. It's a short step in the dance, because that letter of intent has all the key components of what the contract offer will carry. But we got to agree on that before you get an attorney to draft the contract. It's not a one pager like we typically use on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so she put a number
really
up there, which was like a huge multiple seven-figure number. He came back with a letter of an intent with an offer, which purportedly was less than the asking price, but maybe not too much less. And in both cases, it was because they had done their comps in the city and they know what commercial values are in the city. But you're sitting on undeveloped land, which was sold as raw land, and clearly, while you saw the potential of it, the seller had no idea of the value of what he was sitting on, or she was sitting on.
Well, and they're in a different season in life. I mean, he was a business owner, and it wasn't like he was unsophisticated. He just wanted out. And we made him, it was a healthy offer. And so he moved it, and he said, I want this, I want it sold. I don't want to have this issue for my kids, to be fighting over with an estate, and it just makes it easier. So we liquidated them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's really, it's the same principle scaled up as when we buy, these cheap parcels from people, and you talk to people who are not in the business, and they can't believe how cheap you buy them for, and even sell them for in some cases. But I always use the reference of a garage sale. How many times you walk up to a garage sale and see something for $1, and it's like, that's clearly worth 50 or $100. People are just clearing out. They just want rid of it. They want the convenience, and it's about their situation, and they don't care that much about the money. So, I'm sure he cared about that amount of money, but you're right. He's in a season of life where he doesn't want to hassle with it. He doesn't want to deal with it. He's probably, secure financially. And so, yeah, that's a nice chunk of change for me.
That's what we do, right? We find people that are either distressed or, for whatever reason, the getting max dollar value for the property is not their objective. And if we can find that on those deals, we can make a fortune. It's fantastic. So now, Todd, this is clearly not your first commercial deal. And it's interesting because I think many land investors steer away from commercial properties Do you think that's a wise move or a mistake?
Well, there you can lose a lot of money in the commercial arena. Let me just say that as a precursor, because we've done a number. I want to say 4 commercial deals. One, we did a subdivision, 10 acres out in rinky-dink, Texas, and the seller actually replatted it. He went through that whole process. I didn't even understand what was going on. I was just like, yeah, let's not build a road. Let's just do 4 little tracks and we'll sell them off. And we did. I wish I'd have listened to the old timer. He said, no, you should do a little horseshoe loop road and have 1 acre tracks. And we would have increased our revenue by another 100% in the whole deal and sold it faster. But I didn't listen. So I learned from him. And, I bought a track in Houston. I want to say we paid like $100 grand for it. And it took almost 12 months, but we sold it. And, we made almost $100 grand and our investors made almost $100 grand. And so I was just like, I was amazed. And my commercial broker that we used was a guy that was very aggressive. He, not like most realtors out there. No offense if people are realtors, but most of them put on the MLS and just wait. And this guy was not like that. He put it out there and then he would email me. He would email the potential buyer and blind copy me with the business flyer that he had put together that was just top notch. And he would say, hey, Ricky, just following up from our call. This is our marketing piece. If you got any more questions, let me know. And he would send me like 3 or 4 of those a week. He was talking about our property to people again and again and again. And we finally locked it up. With the commercial deals, the whole period is a lot longer. Okay. Backing up to the bigger deal that I was just telling you about. If everything goes right, and we do get the contract signed and we do go under and escrow and everything, we're looking at least 7 to 9 months to have this thing close. And so most land flippers are not, they're thinking short term. They're like, nah, I could get 28 deals by that time and move my money
Right.
20 times. But I feel like this one's worth sitting on and waiting for. And, that's what I'm looking at,
But, and this is a big but.
Yeah.
When you close it, it's cash. It's not a terms deal. So
Right.
you could sell terms deals and you may not break even for 7 months or just be breaking even at 7 months. You're waiting the 7 months, but boom, it's cash. You cash out your investors. It goes right into your pocket. And we're talking about a multiple 7-figure deal.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and even if you're talking about deals that are a lot smaller, but they're, multiple 6-figure deals or even a 6-figure deal, as far as those are large by the land investment world, the rural vacant land investment world. But they still do take longer. I think you see a lot of people trying to, as you get more accomplished, you start to move up the ladder a little bit. And I've known some guys that are just focusing on those, those kind of, by what you're talking about, they're still small, but larger, vacant land deals. So stuff that maybe you're buying for 50 and selling for 100, 150, things like that. But they do take a little bit longer, and you got to put out some more capital for them. I like to term my keeping the lights on deals, and then my bigger deals, my home run deals. And so I think once you've developed the systems in the business, it's a good idea to keep that lights on the business going. So you always have some of those little deals churning and keeping the lights on, giving you the cash flow to go and work on the big deals that take months and months.
Right. Yeah. You gotta have enough staying power to stay in the game so that some of these big ones can close. And you try and fill your pipeline with a bunch of them. But here's the thing: these commercial deals, they they take a lot more time, energy, and effort, and the learning curve is steep. Okay, so let the buyer beware on that. We had a 2.25 acre deal on the highway frontage on an exit of a major city here in Texas. And I saw the property. It had like almost 60,000 in back taxes. And so the seller was very motivated to get out before she got nothing. And so I made her an offer of $5,000 to take it off her hands, pay all the back taxes, closing costs. We went under contract. I actually went and met her, drove 3 hours out there, met her, signed the agreement, and got it into the title company. And she used to be a realtor, a broker, actually. And I thought that was interesting. Like, why is she getting rid of this to me? And, you know, I didn't think about it enough. I was just so excited.
Right.
Deer in the headlights. This is going to be a huge deal. And so I didn't bring in any investor partners. I used all my money. Okay. My personal bankroll. And so we're in it. We get the survey done after the close. Well, the first thing was she didn't close. I drove up there 3 hours to sign the papers, to pay the money. She didn't want to close. We called her, title called her. She wasn't closing. So we had to renegotiate the contract about 3 weeks later because I was just livid. And she squeezed me for another $5,000. So it was 10 grand. We got the survey done. When we had the survey done after the closing, they found this drainage pipe out there. On its 2.25 acres, there was a little clump of trees and the bushes, and there was this big, 3-foot pipe that's just sticking out there at the bottom in the middle of my new lot. And I'm thinking, title showed that there were 3 kinds of zonings on this 2.25 acre property. There was single family, there was multifamily, and there was also commercial. And so my neighbor to the one side was a big apartment complex. Across the street, I'm on a corner. Across the street is a law office. And I'm thinking, this thing, it's worth money. I've got to get the zoning redone so that I can get, commercial value for this thing. And I'm talking to a commercial broker, and he's like, yeah, we could get the Hilton to buy this. This is on an exit. We're looking at least, he's like, I don't know, 3-4 million. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be fantastic. So I'm like, I'm all in. I don't care. I'm going to get the survey done. Well, the surveyors come back and they say, hey, we found this pipe. We need to locate the pipe because it's not on any of the deeds. It hadn't been recorded anywhere. And I'm like, what do you mean locate the pipe? They're like, yeah, you got to figure out where this pipe enters into your property. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? And they're like, well, get somebody out there to start digging it up, and you just kind of dig it in tracks, and we'll plot it and put it on the map because you got to have it on your survey. Now it's going to be disclosed. So I'm like, okay. So I call a bunch of contractors, and they're like, look, man, I can go out there with a post hole digger thing and I'll hit it and it'll break the pipe. And then, I'm not going to be liable for that. So I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. So I hired this kid. He and I go out there and spend 2 days with pickaxes and shovels. This is like limestone we're digging through. Okay. Texas summer. It was the summertime. We were sweating.
God.
I'm all in because I'm a house rehabber. I'm a flipper. I do a lot of the sweat equity. Right. And so it kind of carries into the land.
Swinging a hammer.
So here we are. We're doing it. We located the pipe, and now it's part of the record. Okay. At the same time, I'm sitting through the city council meetings trying to get this zoning change so that we could be 100% commercial, because that's going to get us the highest and best use. So I go through all that process and I present my case. Do you want to tax us more? I think you do. So let's make it commercial land. Okay. Yep. Everyone was in favor. That was easy enough. Turns out, though, that with commercial properties, you're going to be dealing with attorneys a lot more and surveyors a lot more than you would with many of the other property types that we're engaged in. And so I've got this attorney he was reading the deed and he's like, look, you've got deed restrictions in here. Even though the zoning changed, you fixed the zoning, the deed restrictions abide. And you're not going to change those deed restrictions. You're going to have to get the entire subdivision from like the 70s. And he's like, you've got to get 75% of them to sign off that they want this to be a commercial tract of land. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So then I start calculating, like, I'm like drawing up, I'm getting everybody's name, I'm putting it all in a spreadsheet, I'm going to contact everybody. I was like, already the gears are going, because I heard $4 million from my broker. I'm like, this is going to happen. I don't care what needs to happen. We're going to do it. He's like, short of an act of God, you're never going to get them, because even if they've been deceased, that like kills it. And so I'm like, oh, this subdivision was from the 70s. There's no way to get around this. And so I had these deed restrictions that I couldn't fix. And then I'm concerned about that drainage pipe. And I'm like, how in the world am I going to fix that pipe? Like, why is that there? Why isn't it on the record? I went to the city. I pulled every deed from like all the way from the 50s when this thing had been subdivided and split off. And I knew I had stacks of paper all over my office. Like, and I felt like an underwriter at a title company, because I was like digging in. It was eating up so much bandwidth of my time in 2018. And I came to the end of it, and I was like, I got to get an attorney. I've got to get an attorney, because it's coming from this apartment complex, and these owners are in New York City. Okay. And so
that chaps my hide.
Oh man. I find one of the owner's cell numbers online. Don't ask me how I know how to do this, but I just did. And I called him and I'm like, look, man, I don't know if you know this. You probably don't, but you got a pipe running through my lot, and I want you to move it. And then he lawyers up and gets the highest, I forget what company it was, but my attorney said they're the biggest company in America. And like, they're going to bury you in paperwork, and we're going to go to court, and it's going to be bad. So then I'm like, oh, fantastic. I love commercial real estate. So I ended up creating a new entity to put this tract of land in, to separate it and separate any liability. So I deeded it over to this other, entity that I just created. That cost money. I'm in it. And during this time, we had to pay another year's worth of taxes. I'm into this deal for $100K. And my attorney is telling me, well, we could sue them. We might go to litigation. They might settle. They might not. Yeah. And I'm like, you guys are just trying to get me on the hook for all kinds of money. I fired them. I got rid of them. I didn't think they were helping me. And my broker was the one that introduced me to them. And I'm like, look, they were terrible. So I interviewed new attorneys, and I'm so glad that I did, because this one attorney, she asked me a question in the interview, and she said, well, what do you want to do, Todd? And I said, I want to terminate the pipe at the property line. I'm just going to cement it up, and that's it. But I said, but if I do that, then I'm going to have erosion come across my track, because they're higher than me. That's why there's a pipe through my land. And then I'll have all this sediment on the street, and I'll be on the hook for cleaning it up. And she goes, so you benefit from the pipe too, don't you? And the shoe dropped, and I was just like, oh, you fool. I do benefit from this pipe, and so do they. And they could care less. And their response, the apartment complex owner's response was, do whatever you want to do with the pipe. We don't care. It's on your land. Smug punk. So
As long as we get our rental fees.
yeah, I was hot. So I'm like, I'm stuck with this deal that I thought was going to be a grand slam home run. And I'm 6 figures into it, and I don't see an exit. And so I'm just like scratching my head thinking, I need a little help here. Lord, help me. What do I got to do? And so I decided to relist it with a different broker. And I ended up gifting it to a nonprofit. Actually, that was my highest and best use of the land. And you may think, well, that's kind of crazy. You're already out 6 figures. But we had to do a third-party appraisal. And so we did that, and it appraised at 436. And so as I did the math on tax brackets and everything, that's better than 100K. I hate to lose 100K liquid, but hey, I've got this huge tax deduction and it gets me out of the deal. Cause I could just tell you that was that took over a year and it was a lot of learning, but it made me realize there are so many things to consider in the commercial world that normally you would not deal with half of this stuff. So it was an education.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean, wow. So there are
Right.
deed restrictions that have to be approved by the subdivision regardless of the zoning. That's the key takeaway here.
Yep.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
deed
yeah.
restrictions apply.
So yeah, there's some big lessons there. And for our listeners, you know, if you're new or you're just thinking about this niche and you just discovered our podcast, you know, most of our content has to do with the cheap rural or cheaper rural vacant land, typically ag and res. And you know, we don't get into the commercial too often. So don't be scared. Listen to our other podcasts. But this bodes to the point of having, you know, how much of a hassle and money and cost and the whole 9 yards would having a mentor who already been through this stuff had helped you in that situation, Todd.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely would have helped.
Hey, folks, people often talk about automating and outsourcing your land flipping business, but what does that really mean? Generic solutions leave it to you to figure out how to set up and maintain the automations. I've been running my land business on Landspeed for over 3 years because it's a total solution and allows me to focus on being a great land investor. Landspeed was built specifically for land investing by a land investor. And with many of the most successful people in the business using it for years, it's evolved into one of the most feature-rich solutions on the market. Some of the key benefits I get are being able to create and manage mail campaigns and neighbor letters. I'm able to automate tasks amongst my team, create contracts and deeds, and email, text, or mail them within a few clicks. I can automatically capture sales leads from any lead source, including Facebook Messenger. Then it automatically pushes those leads into my sales funnel so that I can manually follow up, but they also go into my automated drip campaign. And since Landspeed's a total cloud-based solution, I can run my business from anywhere in the world with a phone, laptop, or tablet. So if you want to turn your hobby into a professional, scalable business, just go to landspeedtech.com/Dave to receive a $150 discount today.
But
Well, there's mentors,
Yeah.
and then there's just surrounding yourself with the right team of experts. I mean, in this case, for that kind of a deal of those kinds of numbers, we're talking about lawyers and brokers and, you know, commercial brokers, people who specialize in that kind of a thing. And I wonder, when you was that your first commercial deal?
no, that
Okay.
was my
Okay.
second or third.
But when you approached it, were you approaching it with the mindset of a commercial deal, or were you approaching it with the mindset of just a land investor and you know how we normally would approach cheap rural land?
Right. I just saw there's equity here. I
Yeah.
saw it immediately. And so I was like, I want it. I locked it up. I did what I needed to do. But then the more I found out about it, I was like, whoa, there's all kinds of reasons this hasn't been developed.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the
you
thing
had
that
the tunnel
strikes
vision
me
and
so hard in your story is that you didn't do the survey until after the closing.
Bingo. That's a big one. That's a big takeaway for
Yeah.
me. We do the surveys up front. You spend the money up front. And
Absolutely.
so many times we don't want to spend a nickel. We don't even want to take the property down. We just want to put it under contract and find the end buyer
Right.
and then sell it. And hey, guess what?
double close
listener?
it.
I get all those deals because you don't want to close them. And I'm excited because sellers know that they don't want to tie up their property indefinitely.
Yeah.
But you know, committing capital to the deal when there's equity there it's a wise idea. And that's definitely one of my takeaways is that you need to do the survey.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the cost of doing business. You know, that is the cost of doing business, and you're preventing I mean, how much did the survey cost again for that property?
Nothing, couple $1,000, but it was
Yeah.
nothing.
So if you'd have done the survey before, you'd have found out about those deed restrictions before you closed, correct?
No, that was not reading the title commitment clearly. Okay, so that was
You would find the pipe in that pipe.
the pipe was the
pipe.
big one.
You'd have found the pipe.
And because
Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to, especially when the woman held back on the closing, and knowing that she was a broker,
Red flag.
you know, and I hope I don't offend any potential brokers in our audience, but you know, these are dirty tricks. I mean, that's just a negotiating ploy, a dirty trick, you know, especially after you. In fact, it reminds me that that's how it is negotiating with, say, the Chinese, you know, because in my prior career, you know, we would do, you know, working for big companies, you know, we would always do these negotiations with the Chinese. And what they would do is they would always insist on doing the negotiation in China.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it takes the top executives, they go over there, they spend their precious time and all this money, and then they've got to go, and they know that that Americans have this short-term, quarterly kind of mentality, and that they're going to have to report back, and they don't want to come back empty-handed.
Right.
So they bring it over there, and then they take the majority of the visit, plying you with alcohol. And then like and then like, you know, 2/3 of the way in, they switch all the negotiators and start the whole conversation from scratch. And then they wear you down. They know you don't want to go back empty-handed, and then they extract all the concessions. And it feels like that's kind of what her approach to negotiating was. But as soon as that happens, you know, and I think your initial instinct was, okay, she's a broker. Why is she selling it? Why hasn't she done anything with it? And those instincts were good, but it sounds like, you know, the dollar sign was so attractive that you were kind of suppressing your instinct.
Right. Yeah. And I felt like the pushback from her to get more money and squeeze me was seeing it confirmed that there's equity in this deal. She knows there's equity and she's not happy. She can't do anything about it, but she's just going to get out and get me for, you know, 10 grand. But you
think she knew about the problems?
She absolutely knew. Absolutely. Yep.
But doesn't she have a fiduciary legal responsibility to disclose that? Isn't there a lawsuit there somewhere?
No, because number one, we used our contract, which is not airtight. Like if we would use the Texas Real Estate Commission's contract, she would have had to disclose anything that she knew. And the other thing is, I don't think she was still active. So she was a broker, but I don't think she was active at that point. So
she was an ex-broker.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
you know, this is just one of the many deals that we made mistakes on. And so I share it just to show you that you got to get creative as an entrepreneur, think outside the box and do things that people wouldn't typically want to do. One time, I remember I bought a piece of property that was like 3 acres, got it from a guy in Florida, and you know, it's here in Texas. I was going to subdivide. It was going to be my first subdivision. It's going to take a 3 acre and make 3 1-acre tracts. And I found out that you can't do that if 90% of it is in the floodplain. So that, you know, this is the stuff you learn. And then I ended up selling it, and we still could make money just by selling it. But you know, it set expectations. Another time we bought another commercial tract down in the city, and this one was really close to the highway. And so again, the highway is like, that's always a good thing. So, but it was in the floodplain, but we paid our money. We had a partner on that deal. We bought it, and then we put it on the market, and I didn't even put it on the MLS. I just made one of my homemade signs, put it out there, that my daughter painted, hand painted. Now, Stefan Arnio, he's a wholesaler from Vancouver. He's like, the more ghetto it looks, the better. You look less sophisticated. People are going to call you and offer you money. And they did. And so I had it under contract immediately. This guy was going to put a fast food restaurant in there. And so he comes back to me after like a week of being under contract. He goes, Todd, do you realize this it's not in the floodplain. It's actually in the floodway. And I'm like, excuse me, because Because to this point, we've sold like over a dozen properties that were in the floodplain. You know, that's not a big deal. But when you're in the floodway, that means you're at the bottom of the river. And this is in the city. It doesn't
Flowing
make
water.
sense. Right. So Hurricane Harvey happened, and all the flood maps, they kind of got moved. And anyway, that contract fell apart because you couldn't do a 6-foot elevated drive-through because, you know, it just doesn't work. This guy wanted it bad, but he couldn't make it work. So we ended up selling it to some guy that was going to put a semi-tractor trailer repair business in with no walls on the side, just a, you know, covered area and just mechanic shop. So I guess it'll clean the oil off the pad if it ever floods. But you got to disclose that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you know, these are all mistakes that we make.
That's interesting. That's a big one you got to watch out for in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Floodways.
Well,
That is
yeah.
So I think we're going to title this episode "Mistake Your Way to Success."
Yeah.
and then
So I know you've
and
got
then
like a
with the
deep pool. What's that, Dave?
And then with the caption, the more ghetto, the better.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't take credit for that. That's Stefan Arnio.
that is great. That is great.
But yeah, I'd say, you know, for a lot of people in this business, they look at scaling as, you know, they go from 10 deals a year to I want to go to 30 or 50 or 100 or 200 deals. And I look at that and I'm just like, man, that sounds like a job. I don't want to do any of that. I don't care how much automating and all that. So you can scale using other people's time, right? But the way I chose to scale is using other people's money. And so getting into the bigger deals, you know, that it requires more due diligence. And there's a whole side of the business that's, you know, where you've got to cultivate investors and raising capital. And some people just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've decided that's an area that I feel strongly about, that, you know, I want to be engaging and, you know, having savvy investors helps because they bring all kinds of resources to the table, not just money. And so having another set of eyes, I don't know if any of you guys have done, you know, hard money loan, you know, the hard money lender is not going to give you any money unless they think there's a deal there. And so that's true with private equity. They're only going to fund it if they think that you've got a good chance. And so that helps. It definitely helps.
That's really an incredible point. I really want to just emphasize that because I think everybody wants to scale. Everybody, you know, our whole model at Land.MBA from the beginning was, you know, how to take it from a hobbyist business up to, you know, this thriving business that will transform your lifestyle. And that requires scaling. But what you just said is so fascinating because there's another customer of mine that we're getting onto the podcast. And there were 3 guys, they started, and now they've got a full-time staff of 20.
Yeah. And
they are killing it. But I mean, they've got an office, they've got people coming in every day, they've got a managed staff. You know, it is truly a job. I mean, they go to work, you know, 6 days a week, and it's working. I mean, they're doing great, and they have even more ambition than that. But it's a different way to scale, and it's the classic, you know, high volume, low dollar value versus low volume, high dollar value trade-off, and the difference ends up being how your personal time and energy is allocated.
Yep, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, well, I'll tell you what I'm personally trying to do in my business, and that is I've got the low end volume mostly, you know, 80% outsourced right now, and so my objective is to get that leaner and meaner and running so that I don't have to spend more than 5 hours a week on it, so that I can utilize my time for building relationships with investors, you know, recruiting capital investors, and going after larger deals. So my time is spent on that stuff. I have the lights on part of the business outsourced. That's my goal. So we're trying to do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
But,
Todd, any other classic mistakes you care to share?
Well, so yeah, that covers most of the major ones. So, well, there's one more. Okay. So one of our, there's always one more, right? We took down 63 acres. And again, I didn't bring an investor in because I thought this is such a good deal. I'm going to use all my capital. And so I did. And we ended up cutting it up into 6 tracts of land. And I had a survey done, I had highway frontage, kind of had to do something funky with the lines and everything, but everybody kind of got one piece of frontage, and we ended up having to do a shared driveway. So there were like 3 or 4 surveys that had to be done on top of the first one. We got it all sorted, and I ended up selling the first tract. Okay. And, here goes back to DIY, no realtor involved. I'm selling it on my own with my signs that are out there. And I made a little boo-boo in the contract. And so I'm just going to share it because it's like classic. I didn't even know I made this mistake, actually. I put the contract together and I showed the survey. She's going to get 10 acres. It was a seller finance deal. But instead of using the 10-acre legal description, I did the legal description for all 63 acres.
Oh, no.
And so technically I sold the entire tract to the first buyer. Okay. I didn't know this until the second tract got sold, because the second tract went under contract, goes to the title company. Now there's realtors involved on both sides. And my realtor calls me. He's like, hey, they're saying that you sold the whole tract to this other person. That was before I was in on the deal. What's the deal? So I go back through the paperwork. I'm like, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's my, default. But I look at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, it is. I did sell the whole thing to her. And so, I had to clean that up. And so, this is where you've got to have other skills, because you can't just rely on one tool in your toolbox. And so I'm good on the phone with people. And I picked up the phone and I talked to the lady, and I'm like, look, when we signed the contract, it said if the title company screwed up, because there's an errors and omissions thing, we've got to fix the paperwork. Well, there was a mistake. And so we're going to have to fix the paperwork. I'm going to send it to you. Just go to your notary, or we'll send you a notary. And she signed it. She's like, okay, but when's that water meter going in? That was her main question. And so I'm like, yeah, it's coming. But we got her to sign it. And then everything was fixed, and the deed had to be fixed. And so long story short, it was like, it pays to have professionals on your team and let them do some work. I am a firm believer in getting, realtors that are good to sell the property, and just take myself completely out of that role.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is priceless wisdom right there.
Well, I tell you, before we wrap it up, I feel like my secret sauce, and it may not seem like secret sauce, is that it's something that probably most of the folks on the call don't practice. And it's a simple thing that we call tithing. Okay. And it's like, how in the world does this relate to anything you're talking about, Todd? Well, there's times when we bought a property next to the city dump, and we scheduled, the acquisition, and then, we're going to have a cleanup cost of 20 grand, and we contract that out, and we get into the deal. And this guy's thinking there's, 20 loads to the dump. And well, it turns out there was 96 tons of trash on this 8-acre lot. And we're just like, this is outrageous, And so I had to kick up some more money. But getting back to the tithing, I had promised a missionary family that whatever proceeds I get out of this deal, I'm going to tithe, which just means 1/10 goes back to you, okay, to the Lord and to this ministry. And so I got a secret weapon, and it's these people that pray to God, and they ask God to help me. And I'm telling you, I know he's helping me because I make so many mistakes that I'm living proof that if God wasn't with me and on my side, I would be out of business. I mean, what is it, like 96% of businesses fail in the first 5 years? I think that's, I'm almost at 5 years now, and we're going strong. And it's because of this deal. So going back to the big deal in Houston here, like my financial partner on this deal, he runs a mission agency in Colombia. Okay. And so he has already allocated the profit to go towards funding their microcredit program for this. It's an enormous like network of schools for kids from kindergarten all the way up to high school. I think there's like 5 of them that they oversee there in Colombia. That's thousands of people, and they need the money. And so I'm like, okay, well, just tell those people to start praying because you've already made your commitment. And I talked to a buddy of mine who's in Asia. He's doing church planting in an area where we used to live. And I said, look, my percentage this time, it's going to go to help your staff. I've committed it before the Lord, and I'm going to give it. And God says it. He says, test me in this, in tithing, and see if I don't open up the windows of heaven so much so that you're not going to be able to measure it. You're not going to be able to count it. And I'm living proof that there's definitely some truth to that scripture in Malachi 3.
That is priceless.
Absolutely.
You put good out in the world, and there is kind of, however you want to do it, whatever your religious background is. I think just the experiences, you put good into the world, and it has a way of coming back to you. And
it's amen.
And that's fantastic.
There's a life principle. I used to say, I can't outgive God. But it's just a principle that givers gain, period. So coming back to what you said, how, whatever your faith is, it's giving just always never comes back void.
Yeah. I mean, call it, I can't do justice to the words that Todd just used, but call it that, call it karma, call it whatever you want. It's just good things to do. And, and I think there's also a practical side to this, which is just that, you really, really have to step in it badly to fail in this business. I mean, we all make mistakes every day. In my entire career, I would always say, if I haven't made 10 substantial mistakes today, I just haven't tried hard enough. I'm sitting back on my laurels. I got to get out there. I got to be pushing. You got to get out of your comfort zone if you want to grow. And anytime you're getting out of your comfort zone, you're doing things where you may not be fully 100% equipped to do it. You're going to make mistakes, but there are so few mistakes that are irretrievable. Right. At the end of the day, we're all human beings trying to make it in this world. And, you called that woman up, you made a mistake on the contract. And I'm sure that, the way you communicated it to her was appropriate. And the fact of the matter is, what was her expectation? Her expectation was she was getting 10 acres. Her expectation is she wanted the water meter. You were scared to death because you knew that technically you had sold her the entire 60 acres. She probably didn't know that. And nor did she expect it or even care. She wanted what she paid for. And my experience is that, and again, apologize to anybody on the audience who might be offended, with the possible exception of certain lawyers and realtors, most people just want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Well, gentlemen, we're kind of over time, so let's close it out. Todd, I want to thank you for coming on. A, are there any final thoughts? And B, is there if audience wanted to reach out to you, is there a way that you'd like them to reach out?
Oh, yeah. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate very much the opportunity. And yeah, if people wanted to reach out to us, they could do that online at our website, land-buyer-usa.com. And that's a way to get in contact with us. But, I would just say that the sky's the limit in this business. You know, my background here is the latest acquisition that we did about an hour from where I live, and it's a 72-acre parcel. And we actually got bank financing. I've had bankers tell me, you're not bankable. You just, your balance sheet is terrible. You don't get enough money. You're losing money. Your AGI is negative, and all these, you know, negative things. I look at them like, okay, you're the wrong bank. And finally, after doing enough interviews and talking to enough bankers, we got a bank loan. And so I'm like, the cost of capital is so much cheaper, and we're able to get into this huge deal. And I just think, you know, there's no telling what could happen in this business. And I want to say that this is the best hedge for inflation is land. So if you're long in land, if your inventory is land, you're in good shape. Cash is trash, land is king.
And now more important than ever.
Absolutely. So thanks.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you.
Great, Todd. Thanks
you,
again.
Todd. You have an awesome day, man.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, and if you enjoy the Land.MBA podcast in general, and if you agree with Todd Hays that this is the best content for the land investor, then please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. This will boost our ratings and make it easier for us to provide you more tremendous content down the road. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Land.MBA podcast.